It's not the creating it that feels risky to me. It's the sharing it. Because there's nothing risky about creating anything. There's really not. I mean, unless you're creating something with explosive chemicals or something. There's zero risk in creating anything. There's only risk in sharing it.
That was Adam Levy, guitar slinging musical alchemist. When it comes to music, everything this guy touches turns to gold. He's a super thoughtful guy. We covered a lot of ground in this interview. I think you're going to dig it. Just keep on listening. 2, 3, 4. Hey there, podcast people. John here. You are listening to Season 2, Episode 10 of Make Moves. This episode features a really interesting interview with Adam Levy. Adam first came on my radar because he played a bunch of those couldn't be more perfect solos with Norah Jones when she was blowing up. And as a guitar nerd, of course, I asked myself, who is this guy? And I guess as you will hear later on in the interview, that's kind of Adam's calling card as a sideman. He's the guy you call when you want someone to play exactly what the song needs. Adam does that. He also has about a dozen albums of his own, and when I started looking into him to sort of figure out what his body of work looked like, I stumbled into a tune he wrote called Washing Day, and for me anyway, it was one of those tunes that you listen to 10 times in a row, and then you kind of ask yourself, is it really as good as I think it is? I mean, it was just so amazing. It caught my attention, and for me, the answer was, and still is after a dozen years, yes, the song was that good. He really just writes those kinds of tunes. Anyway, way back then, I tried to be his MySpace friend, and I, was searching him out, trying to learn everything that I could about him. And, fast forward about a dozen years, now Make Moves is in existence. One day I get an email from Adam Levy, and I think to myself, I wonder if I signed up for his email list. He must be emailing me tour dates or something like that. And then I opened up the email, and to my surprise, Adam had caught the interview that I did with Bill Frisell, and he was just reaching out to say that he liked the interview. And my first thought was, Adam, you're going to come on Make Moves, right? Well, I mean, actually, I asked him it like a question that I was hoping he would say yes to, but it really wasn't a question in my mind. He had to come on the show. So this, for me, is kind of a big full circle, and I'm excited that you're all going to get a chance to hear it. If you are just hearing Make Moves for the first time ever because you're following the breadcrumb trail from Adam Levy to this show, please do consider subscribing to the show, rate it, review it in iTunes, and spread the word a little bit. We're really glad to have you here, and for all the loyal listeners out there, thanks for coming back and spending more time with us. Speaking of time, I think I should level with you. I know this is a long episode. Adam and I really hit it off. We talked way longer than I thought we ever would, and luckily he was game to keep going. I hope you'll ease into it, take your time, and really enjoy every bit of it. There's a lot of great conversation to listen to, and I interspersed a lot of great music from Adam in the episode as well. Another thing worth mentioning is that the name Ted Green comes up in my conversation with Adam. Actually, every time I talk to any guitar player, the name Ted Green seems to come up. But for you non-guitar nerds, I feel like I should clue you in a little bit. Ted Green was a almost mythical musical genius, and he was a legendary guitar teacher. I think hundreds, if not thousands, of very well-known guitar players studied with Ted. And if they didn't study with Ted during his lifetime, almost all of them have at least seen his books. Ted, almost by luck of the draw, happened to be my guitar teacher in my 20s. And so whenever I have conversations with guitar dorks like Adam, Ted's name seems to come up. It's sort of like having Einstein for a physics teacher or something. He's just such a common reference point that he is part of the conversation when you talk with guitar players. Okay. I'm going to get out of the way here so we can get to the interview. You'll notice that about halfway through, I start interspersing some musical breaks with great tunes by Adam. I'll check in with you at the end so we can have a little wrap up. But for now, I'm going to turn off my mic. You turn on your ears and enjoy the show. Happy listening. Hey, Adam, welcome to Make Moves, man.
Thanks, John. It's good to be here.
Ow. Jeez, I'm banging my knees into stuff. Listeners, we are in the basement of a building right now that I did not know there were basements in buildings in California, and we are in the basement, and it is kind of creepy and cool at the same time.
Yeah, it feels very top secret. It's like Well, this will show my age, but I feel like it's the episode of like the $6 Million Man or something like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. All right. Well, anyway, Adam, I'm glad to have you on the show. As a guitar nerd, I'm really excited to get a chance to talk with you because I myself remember discovering you and thinking to myself, man, this guy really understands what music is supposed to do. I came up in the 80s, just as a little background, playing guitar, and back then it was real competitive and everyone was stealing each other's licks and trying to sell them to their students in the form of lessons, and it was faster, me, look at me, more, louder.
Yeah.
And it is really not in service to the music. And then I heard you play and I was like, wait a minute, this guy is in service to the music. He gets it. So the first time I heard you, I thought, I got to talk to this guy sometime.
Oh, wow.
I think most guitar nerds out there will know who you are.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the musician types will know, but there might be some non-music types that are out there who would have a blank spot here. So could we talk a little bit about your history as a player to sort of clue everyone into who you're listening to, audience?
Okay.
This is who we got right now.
Well, I mean, if people, I won't start at the beginning. I'll start maybe in the middle. The thing I'm best known for would be playing with Norah Jones, the singer. I played on her first 3 records for Blue Note. So starting in the early 2000s, I played on Come Away With Me and the 2 albums that followed it. And before that, I think if people knew me, it might have been through Tracy Chapman. I played on the song Give Me One Reason from a record.
That won a big gold statue, right?
Yeah, it did. That was really the first real session I played on. I played on a lot of sessions before that for friends and people doing independent things, but that was my first like real recording session, and I won a Grammy. I think it was Record of the Year. So it was kind of exciting.
Yeah, it was.
Like to be on the radio, and yeah, it was pretty cool. So I would say if my name is not familiar, if people are wondering who Adam Levy is, those would be kind of things that they've heard. They've heard me on Give Me One Reason. They've heard me on Come Away With Me, and but before I was playing, I played with Tracy Chapman in the mid '90s, and before that I was living in San Francisco, and I played with Dan Hicks for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
He had Dan Hicks, if people don't know, in the '70s had a band called Dan Hicks and His Hot Licks, and in the '90s he had a streamlined version because that was quite a big group with a lot of harmony singing and a lot of people on stage, a real show, and so he streamlined it to make it a little bit more portable, and it was called the Acoustic Warriors, and I played in that band for a little while. Toured, played on. Somebody just reminded me of this recently. We played on Prairie Home Companion.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that might have been my first on-air experience, was playing on a Prairie Home Companion in like '93 or '94. Yeah.
I mean, and I think since then, I just looked at, Wikipedia to sort of get a feel for all the names. There's a lot of Amos Lee, Lisa LaBelle, and Tousaint. The super hip guys in Vulfpeck.
Yeah.
I mean, you're all over the place. And I think in a lot of ways, I mean, now you've got sort of an aura about you. I mean, everyone knows that if you play on it, it's only going to sound better. And there's a lot of people that I think sort of, that's kind of your thing, is like, get him because I'm trying to be a singer, songwriter, or whatever, and he's going to do it right. Mm-hmm. Is that? Yeah. That's kind of your calling card, right?
That's my calling card.
Okay. Well, good. Well, not to dismiss the fact that you also have about a dozen albums of your own. Yeah. Going back to what, 2001, I think?
Yeah, and I've really always done that. Like, I've always played on other people's records and at the same time wanted to create my own body of work, original music, instrumental music first, and then more in the last decade or so, singing songs and writing words, yeah.
So I first really got hip to you around probably mid 2007 when it was Washing Day, which was, it wasn't your first. You must have had at least 5 or 6 albums before that, but I heard it, it blew my mind.
How did that get on your radar?
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Wow.
But it did, and,
Okay.
and there was 2 tunes on it, the title track and the one about the party is over.
Oh yeah.
And it blew my mind. But anyway, I did the deep dive to figure out.
Wow. Yeah.
So I was looking to figure out who is this guy and what does he sound like. And way back in the beginning, you sort of had a more jazz-like thing going on.
For sure.
What was the Buttermilk?
Buttermilk Channel.
That was Larry Golding, Kenny Wolleson,
Yeah.
and but that's kind of your roots. I mean, you went through, formal jazz training,
I did. Yeah.
so it's sort of obvious that the first ones out of the chute would be like that. Or?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, When I was coming up in music, I was learning jazz standards. Like I went to music school. I went to this school in LA called the Dick Grove School of Music.
Yeah.
Studied jazz, studied arranging, studied composing. And then I studied with Ted Green after I finished school at Dick Grove. I was like, it's a quick school. It wasn't a normal college experience. It was more like a trade school. So a year and you're done. So I went there when I was 17, right out of high school, studied guitar for a year, took a few months off, went back and studied composing and arranging. So by the time I was 19 or 20, I'd completed 2 programs there, mostly centered around jazz, and not thinking about writing my own music. I thought I need to learn the history first and learn to play this incredible body of work that already existed. And then a few years went by and I started to hear records by guitar player band leaders like Bill Frisell. I got to see Bill Frisell play in '89 in LA. A friend of mine called me at the super last minute and was like, hey, there used to be a club in Santa Monica called At My Place. And this friend of mine called me up. He's like, hey, I'm going to see Bill Frisell and I was going to go with my girlfriend and she doesn't want to go. Do you want to go like now? And I was like, sure. And I lived close to there. So we went. So I saw Bill and I was aware of him, but I'd never seen him play live. And that set off something that made me think like, oh, you could write your own music and you could have a group that doesn't sound like, Kenny Burrell in 1959. You could play something that, this was 1989. Now, of course, this is many years later, but you could play something that felt like now. Mm-hmm. And, so I started to discover Bill Frisell, and then through him I discovered this bass player, Mark Johnson, because of these records that Mark Johnson made called Bass Desires that had Bill Frisell. And then this is a bit of a left turn here, but
It's all right. I'll go.
Then Mark Johnson made a record called Right Brain Patrol around 1992 or 93 with this guitar player Ben Monder.
Oh, Ben Monder's he's from another planet.
From
that
another
guy.
planet.
Yeah.
So that record is Mark Johnson playing upright bass, incredible. Like his thing is maybe coming out of Dave Holland, but also just really original and beautiful. So it was like him and Ben Monder, who I don't know that he listens to any other guitar players. He just sounds like you say, he's like from another planet. And then there was a percussionist, this Turkish percussionist, Arto Tunçeboyasin. I'm sure I'm not saying it right. Playing a non-traditional drum set, just playing stuff, And I heard that, and that really made me want to write original music and stop trying to play Stella by Starlight all the time and that kind of thing. So that was really the spark of that time period. Was like the time when I thought I should write music. That's what I should do. That's what every musician, artist, that all the people that I admired, that's what they had done. I don't know why I felt like I had to only go backwards instead of forwards. So that's when I started to look forwards.
That's an interesting cusp, though, because I think a lot of the young jazz guys that come out, they've invested in their education, whatever it is, they're trying to get known, and you don't get known in the jazz circle by not playing jazz, really.
Right.
But so I think they have a lot invested in whatever that identity is. But then something happens, and some of them start doing other things, and you had that I guess that the switch flipped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, I don't have, I think probably time in this moment to go through every album that you did, but I've listened to a lot of them, and they're all they're all interesting in their own ways and musical in their own ways, but I have a little observation that I want to just bounce it off of you. Everything you write feels like it should be in the New American Songbook.
Wow.
And I don't mean just, they're great tunes. A lot of the voice leading and the harmony is sort of really direct, like driving stick shift. Every tune is one that I could imagine being covered or re-recorded 100 times. It's that there's something about your tunes where they seem like they sound unmistakably like you, and yet I think everyone wants to hear themselves in it. I don't know.
Wow.
Is that?
Wow.
Have you ever thought about that? Because I know you have you're pretty well known as a writer too, and I don't think that's an accident.
Well, geez. Wow. I mean, that's my hope, is to write those kinds of songs. I feel maybe I'm kind of a late bloomer. I was talking a minute ago about, these big kind of aha moments I had in instrumental music, where like listening to Ben Monder and Bill Frisell made me want to write original original music, not for singing, but just for a group. And then I came to writing probably a decade after that. So like 94 is when I started writing music and leading my own trio and quartet. And then 2004 was when it hit me that, I should write songs, really. I'd never tried before. I totally skipped that part all through the 90s. It's funny now, like people will mention songs that were huge hits in the 90s. And I don't know them at all, like, because I was waiting for the next John Scofield record to drop or something,
Yeah.
And really, so, and then, so this other big switch flip moment for me was like in the early 2000s when I started playing with Norah. And, then all of a sudden, it's like you're surrounded by songwriters, so you feel like, maybe I'll start writing songs. And I didn't want to write throwaway songs. I didn't want to write songs that seemed to just exist so that I could play guitar solos. Because I thought that was the trap that you could fall into if people know you as a guitar player. And then one day you show up and you say, you know what, I've been writing these songs. Like I would tell my friends that, and I'd kind of watch them. I could see in the back of their mind like, oh no, I hope it's good, because you know what I mean? Like when you tell people like this thing that you know me from, I want to keep doing that, but also I'm doing this new thing I've never done before. I've never sung. I've never written songs. Everybody, they were kind of like, okay, sure, yeah, I'll listen to your songs. I wanted to really bring something that felt, like you're saying, felt lasting and felt classic and felt, so I approached it the same way that I had done with learning jazz guitar, which is I did a lot of transcribing. I'd ask all my friends who are songwriters, like, who are the best songwriters? What are the best what's the important stuff? Because I really hadn't known. It was a complete blind spot to me. I didn't know. I hadn't even really checked out Bob Dylan or anything. Like, it was a blind spot. So my friends would make me these mixtapes, or they would just list, like, you need to learn. And I would sit with headphones and I would literally this was in 2004. You could just find stuff online. You could find lyrics online. You could find books of, here's all the Bob Dylan lyrics, here's all the Tom Waits lyrics, all that stuff. But I didn't want to do that any more than I would like buy a book of Wes Montgomery transcriptions. Like, you learn a lot more if you just sit there and you learn it. So I would just fill notebooks with lyrics off of Bob Dylan records and Tom Waits records and Randy Newman records and Paul Simon records and some more contemporary people. I got really into Chris Whitley for a while. I think he's so great. And I would start to just look at those, and then also musically, like, what are the chords doing? What are the melodies doing? How does it all work together? And I took it as seriously as I would take, figuring out a Billy Strayhorn song, or figuring out, how Joe Pass played Misty, or whatever. Like anything I had done musically, I took songs I took that the same way. And then once I felt like I understood the mechanics of it, I started to try to write in a way that didn't sound like homage or pastiche, but sounded like me. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to go a little off of what I was going to ask you about. I got to follow here. So you mentioned that you were sort of a late bloomer in this way, and I think this might have to do a little bit about the psyche of how people work or when they're comfortable doing their thing. You know, you obviously have an enormous amount of knowledge, and I think it's interesting, you know, if you listen to the chord changes in your tunes. Sorry, listeners, if you're not a guitar nerd or a music person, just, I don't know, talk to yourself for like 1 minute. We'll be right back. But, yeah, I mean, a lot of the chords you're using, there's not a lot of ninths in there to make them funky. There's not the 11ths for the suspensions. There's not the 13ths to make it sound like the cool hip jazz chord. It's not those avant-garde stuff. It's like you had the restraint to keep it below the 7th.
Yeah, yeah.
And really focus on the structure of the tune. And I'm wondering if you would have even had the wherewithal to even think of doing that if you were an early bloomer, like when your ego's like really heavy into it and you got to show it all off.
Yeah.
Because you came to this later after you kind of got some of that out of the way. Do you think that had anything to do with it?
I do. I do think I mean, when I started really writing songs, I was in my mid-30s, which, depending on how old you are, that might seem really young or really in the middle or really old. I don't know. Probably. It's funny. I'll be 51 in November coming up. So to me, like 35, 36, 37, whatever, seems like, oh, I was so young. But I had been playing music a long time at that point. I mean, I joined the local 47 here in LA when I was 18 or 19. I was doing sessions and doing gigs and whatever. So, by the time I started writing songs, I had almost 20 years of professional music making behind me. Something I learned from instrumental music, though, I think informed the song. The thing that you're talking about now, I hadn't thought of this till just this moment, but when I made Buttermilk Channel, this instrumental record that I made in the early 2000s, I was living in New York. I was surrounded by guys with incredible chops. Ben Monder, Wayne Krantz, even, the earlier generation guys like Mike Stern. Mm-hmm. But, guys like my age were just playing the shit out of the guitar. Kurt Rosenwinkel was coming up on the scene. I think Oz Noy was already around. Dave Tronzo was doing all this crazy stuff with the slide. People were just playing. Adam Rogers. Do you know his playing?
Yeah.
And I just thought there's no room to play that way. If you show up in New York, you're not going to have more chops than anyone. You can't. In a town with those players, you're not going to outdo them. So I thought, what can I do that's not that? And I remember when I was writing Buttermilk Channel, I wanted to write tunes with triads and not with 7ths and 9ths and 13ths. And I remember also spending a lot of time with pentatonic scales, which is funny because it's like the first thing you learn on the guitar. When you're 13 or 14, you learn the pentatonic scales, and then you get this idea in your head that, like, we move beyond that now. Like, okay, that's for Zeppelin riffs or whatever. I want to learn about the Dorian mode. I want to learn about all this colorful stuff, and the pentatonic stuff kind of falls away as you get more sophisticated in jazz. And I really had this moment in the early 2000s where I was like, I want to write songs where the melodies are pentatonic, the harmonies are triadic. It doesn't mean it's just 1, 4, 5. The chords could go all kinds of places, right? It doesn't. The music didn't have to be simple, but I wanted the harmony to be very clear, and I wanted the melodies to be really clear. And later when I started writing songs with words, I think that same sensibility was there. It's like, what can I carve away, and how can I make this as direct as possible, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, there is a directness to your writing, which is, well, I wrote that down in my notes. Direct. It's sort of unmistakable. Before I start moving into the other facets of who you are there any other major landmark accomplishments or people that you played with or things that you did as a player that you think should just be there for the record? And maybe we got most of it and we can move on, but what is it?
Well, let me just think. I mean, the things I mentioned are definitely the things that are probably the headlines of my career so far. And you touched on some of the things. Yeah, I got to play with Alan Tousaint on his last record. I got to play with Vulfpeck recently, and it's amazing to be, you know, kind of spanning decades of musical goodness and getting to play with different people. I'm trying to think, though, if there's other big landmarks. Well, yeah, okay. One or two things. I've gotten to make a couple records with Todd Sickafoose, who's a bassist, composer, producer.
Mm-hmm.
He made a record called Tiny Resistors that I played on that, excuse me, is really beautiful. People may not know about him, but he's been in Ani DeFranco's band for close to a decade playing bass, but he's an incredible composer and producer. So I've gotten to also do other projects that he's produced. I played on a record by a singer-songwriter named Anais Mitchell called Young Man in America that I think is just one of the best records that I've ever been a part of. She's a really powerful writer, and Todd made that record really special. Last year I got to record one song for Joe Henry. Do you know Joe? He's a producer and singer-songwriter. I bet you if you know who he is, if his name doesn't ring a bell. He's incredible producer, incredible artist, and he's how I wound up working with Alan Tousaint. He produced Alan's last record and also the record before that for Alan. And he wrote this beautiful tribute to Muhammad Ali about a year ago. Joe's really a poet. He's really special. You should check him out.
I will. Well, Muhammad Ali is one of my childhood heroes, so I feel like I need to do the homework on that one.
So just check out, it's just that one song. He just recorded it as a single, and of course the name of the song is eluding me at the moment. It's something that Ali said, and I can't remember what it is right now. And gosh, I'm sure I'm forgetting the things, but I did want to mention Todd Sickafoose because he's somebody who's really special, who I think brings out unexpected things from almost everybody that he works with. Like, he really knows. There's different kinds of producers. Some producers have a fixed idea of like, this record's going to go this way, and I think some producers, it's like, not that I know anything about making movies, but I imagine it's like a director. You know, part of your job as a director is if you hire the right actors, you don't have to tell them that much.
Right.
And I think Todd's kind of that way. He doesn't micromanage. He gets the people in the room that he wants there, and he gets everybody playing at once. He's not that big into overdubs. And Joe's the same way. When Joe makes records, Joe Henry, they're very much what they call band on the floor records. Mm-hmm. So people are reacting to each other in real time. And that's really when the stuff comes out. When it's just you in a room with headphones on and everybody's gone home and everybody's looking at you like, hey, you're that guy. Go ahead and make some magic happen. And like, everybody's just sitting there with their arms crossed or checking their phones or whatever. And like, I'm not very good at that, and I really don't enjoy it. I guess some people are really good at that. But that's the style that I like, is working with people who get good people together and
make it in the moment.
and make it in the moment. Yeah.
I like that, band on the floor. I've never heard that.
Yeah.
I feel a hashtag coming.
Yeah, hashtag band on the floor. Yeah.
Which doesn't mean band strung out or drunk on the floor. It's something different, listeners. Let's put a book in there, because I think we could go on and talk about that for maybe hours, and there's more to you than that. So I want to hit on a few things.
Sure.
Another way that people might know about you is through your journalistic activities. You've written for a lot of major music publications, Guitar Player, Acoustic Guitar, Fretboard Journal.
Yeah.
Have you written for any others that I should be thinking about?
Premier Guitar. Did you say?
I didn't say Premier.
Yeah, Premier Guitar. And for a minute, I was writing for Guitar World as well. So pretty much all of them. Yeah.
I do have a question about why you took to writing words.
Okay.
But I want to come back to that, because I just want to tell you that when I first got onto you, I think maybe you were one of the first musicians to have your own blog, or I can't remember where this was. Maybe it was an article or blog, but you wrote this article about how to make the ubiquitous Roland Jazz Chorus 120 sound good. And I remember, I think this was right around MySpace time. Or something. I think that's what it.
Yeah.
And I spent 10 years wrestling with the Roland Jazz Chorus, and in about 2 paragraphs, you explained how to make them sound good. And I thought, well, first of all, where was this guy when I needed him 10 years ago? And second of all, you distilled a really bit of helpful advice into a very small amount of space on the page. And I always appreciated that. But it got me thinking that, aside from listening and transcribing songs and doing all these things, there's something to be learned by maybe what's written or what's spoken by these musicians. And, with that as a little backdrop, I wanted to ask you, did any of that, were you thinking about that when you wanted to start writing journalistically, or was this like another stream of income and you were able to write coherent sentences, so you did it? How did you wind up doing that?
Yeah. It probably stemmed from stream of income. I started writing for Guitar Player first, and I had just moved to New York, and I was, living in a tiny little apartment that I was subletting from a friend, and it had a grand piano in it. Like, it was like a caricature of what you think of New York musical life. Like, people can't see the room that we're in, but we're in a pretty small room here. We're like in a radio booth. Yeah. And I was in that size room with a grand piano, and also this big humidifier that I had to keep watering to keep the piano in the correct. Anyway, I was in New York, I had no idea how I was going to pay rent. I wasn't gigging that much, and I'd always, enjoyed writing. And back then, Guitar Player magazine, this is like mid-90s, had a section in the back that was lessons. They had transitioned away from, like, when I was a kid reading Guitar Player, they just had regular guys. Like, I think Arlen Roth had a column, and John Knowles had a column, and Arnie Burrell had a column, and Larry Coryell had a column. They had transitioned away from that towards this kind of loose-knit band of people that were writing lessons, and they would say at the end of that section, I can't remember what the section was called, but they basically had an open call, like, hey, if you have an idea for a lesson, send it to us. We'll consider it. So I wrote one about arpeggios. I wrote this lesson for them called I Hate Arpeggios. I still hate arpeggios. And they published it, and it was almost unchanged. And I was stoked because I'd never been in a magazine before, and I had no idea. And so they said, send us some more stuff. So I sent some more stuff, and they wound up publishing it. And I noticed that they weren't messing with it too much. So I had a knack for understanding, like, look, this is our format, this is our tone. If you can write in this format and in this kind of vibe, and it's a valuable lesson, we'll publish it. And they would, these checks would come in the mail. Wow, I'm in Guitar Player magazine. I'm getting paid. It was kind of a sneaky way to get in Guitar Player magazine because they weren't writing about me, but there I am, So it's like,
as long as they spell your name right, we're good.
Yeah, I'm in the magazine and I get paid. That's cool. So, so I did that for like a year, and then I got a funny call from them saying that a couple people had left the magazine, and what I consider like a job there, a full-time, editorial job. And I was like, well, I looked at this tiny little apartment I was living in New York, and I was like, well, I started to get a sense of like what's actual money, and Guitar Player magazine is cool. So long story short, I took the job, and I moved back to California. I grew up in LA. I was living in New York. In between, I was in San Francisco. I moved back to San Francisco, took the job at Guitar Player, and did that for a while, and learned to write on the fly, because before that I had just been writing these little, I'd get an idea. They're kind of like think pieces almost, Now it's like, I'm on salary and I've got to write, 10 articles a month. I've got to interview other people, which I'd never done. I've got to write to size, like, this needs to be this many words, this needs to be this many words. Also, don't forget to mention some of our advertisers in the, I was so naive. I really had no sense of that's what magazine writing could be about. So that's really how I got into it. I fell ass backwards into it, which a lot of my career, if I look at it, kind of happened that way. I met Norah Jones completely by accident. I got hired at Guitar Player magazine as an editor in a really unexpected way. Like, I didn't go to journalism school or anything like that. I got the job playing with Tracy Chapman by accident. Charlie Hunter had been her opening act on a tour, the Charlie Hunter Trio, and she asked him if he wanted to join her band, and he was like, no, I'm not going to do that, but you should call Adam Levy. And so many great opportunities for me have come about either accidentally or just thinking, maybe I'll do this, and then something, a year goes by, 5 years go by, 10 years go by, and that's what I'm doing. Maybe that's how everyone's life is. I don't know.
I'm praying that's how it goes for me.
I think you have to just stay open. It's sort of a real...
but you had a few early wins where things just sort of fell out of the sky.
For sure.
So, do you feel you were conditioned sort of early on to say, oh yeah, well, weird stuff happens. That's how it goes.
That's exactly right. If I look at it that way, that's right. Okay, so like when I started writing songs, right, I was on the bus with Norah Jones. I'd never written songs before. She casually mentions on the bus, she said this to everybody, not just to me, everybody in the band, why don't you guys should write some songs. I need songs. We're out here every night singing. I'm tired of these same dozen songs from the record. So I wrote one song. And we did it at Soundcheck like that day, and then it became like a Soundcheck staple, and then it became a live show staple, and then it got recorded on her second record. So when the first song you write is like, winds up on, a multi-million selling record on Blue Note, you kind of like have a different perspective than somebody who's like banging their head against the wall for a long time. And I feel like I've had a lot of those. I feel really lucky or blessed or something, I don't know.
This is our house, 3 little rooms. It ain't too bad when the flowers are in bloom. Don't get much sun, don't get much shade, but this is our house, we've got it made. This is our child, the apple from our tree. She looks like you, and she talks like me. Someday she'll lead the band in a honky-tonk parade, This is our family. We got it made.
With permission, we are listening to Adam Levy and Jay Bellarose playing the song This Is Our House off the album Blueberry Blonde. A lot of what you did was around education and teaching.
Right, okay.
And I feel like I want to open this up for discussion a little bit. You've taught independently. You had weren't you associated with a music school in LA for a while?
Yeah.
Or are you still? I don't know.
I am, yeah. I was at the LA College of Music in Pasadena. I was the department chair for a couple years. Now I'm just on faculty, just teaching there. Not just, but yeah.
You were early in some of this online stuff. You did
Yeah.
stuff with TrueFire and My Music Master Class. I mean,
Yeah.
you've done a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
You had a book.
Yeah.
Which I think is perfect title, Play the Right Stuff. I mean, that's just so you. I think a lot of guys teach because they need the bread, which maybe you did. I don't know. I mean, everyone's got to pay their bills. But I also get the sense that you really like it. And I'll tell you why. And it's because I know you started a YouTube channel that was about guitar tips. And I mean, maybe you made a few bucks doing it, but you gave away a lot of really good information. I think is there something about teaching that you really like over and above making a few bucks?
Yeah, there is. I never liked the idea that that it should be this super lofty, inaccessible, snobby thing of like, well, I don't know, it's just guitar and people get excited and they want to play it. And if you make it like some kind of, elitist thing that only a few people have access to, I think it just turns people off. And I love the guitar. I was that young person who wanted to learn to play, and I was that 20-year-old, and I was that 30-year-old, and I was that 40-year-old, and now in a way we have kind of almost the opposite situation. When I was growing up, and probably you too, it was hard to get information. Like that one little column that Larry Coryell had in Guitar Player every month, you'd be like, whoa, one page, this is incredible. I'll read this over and over and play it. And of course now there's way too much information, and people have to sort out what's really the important stuff. So this has always been my teaching style in one-on-one teaching, but for sure with guitar tips, the idea was like, I wanted to cut to the stuff that is actually valuable and demystify things, and even like that thing with the JC 120 amp.
Yeah.
Like every touring musician has had that problem. Like this amp is everywhere. I would never use it at home. How do I bring my sound to this amp that makes no sense to me? It's a completely foreign thing. It doesn't do the thing that my amp at home does, but I need it to. And this is especially when I wrote that one thing about it. This is before the resurgence of boutique pedals. Now I think people wouldn't even care if they had a JC 120. They've got stuff on their pedal board that makes their sound the way they want. But if you're not a pedal person, and I do play pedals, but I'm not a super big pedal guy, I need the amp to be an amplifier. Like, here's my sound, take that sound and make it louder. That's really what I want an amp to do. And and then sometimes color it in a certain way. And so in guitar tips, I wanted to share things like that were super practical, not a bunch of just mumbo jumbo, or not shtick, or not selling things or anything, but just like, here's stuff that might help you on a gig tonight, now. And also just some philosophical things about, like, I was really inspired by, did you ever read that Mick Goodrick book, The Advancing Guitarist?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of actual like guitar stuff in it, but then there's this whole section in the back that's just like little short things of like, not regretting anything, like, or just a couple sentences about one thing that makes you like go, oh yeah. And the guitar, when you're playing the guitar and practicing, most of the time you're alone. You're just in your room, and you might have self-doubt. Am I practicing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction? What am I doing? And so I've just tried to share things that might encourage people in a positive way, not to sugarcoat anything. I mean, there's hard work ahead. If you want to play any instrument, there's a lot of hard work ahead. But without sugarcoating anything, I also I don't know what's the opposite of sugarcoating, where you make things seem unnecessarily complex, unnecessarily mysterious. I hate that shit. Even more than I hate sugarcoating is like, let's just cloak it all in this mystery. It's like it shouldn't be that way.
I always thought about that. There's a million videos on YouTube about the, every mode and the Phrygian this and the this and that. But maybe that's how you think. If you think about the guitar in modes, good for you. If it works, that's really what counts. But I always thought, that there's essentially 12 notes in Western harmony.
Yeah.
And all of these modes are basically, you're playing one of those.
Yeah. Yep.
There's 12 keys.
Yeah.
And maybe you're clashing a couple of keys, but you're basically I think that's mostly what it is. Maybe the modes help you break it up into more bite-sized chunks or something, but
I guess.
But it always seems simpler to me to just not worry about every variation of everything. You have some titles, one, how to memorize tunes,
right.
The 7 chords you need to know. I think there was one, and I think that's really helpful when you're alone. Maybe you don't have a great guitar teacher in your town, or maybe you are sitting alone in your room, and
right.
You go and you find some guy and he's sort of soft-spoken. He says, "No, like start with these 7 chords. These will get you through most things." And then when you get those down, well, then go buy the book Chord Chemistry and learn every single chord in the world. But
man, this is going to be I don't know if this is weird to talk about or not, but. Okay, so I'm not very religious. I mean, I'm not really religious at all. But people might guess from my name that I am of, Jewish lineage. I have like a so stereotypical Jewish name. If you were going to have a Jewish character in a TV show, like you would just call him Adam Levy. Like that's what it is. But I don't really know that much about Judaism. I really don't. I wasn't raised in a particularly religious way. But a few years ago, I remember sitting on an airplane, and next to a guy, just from the way he dressed, I could see that he took Judaism very seriously, and he's with his son. And the plane takes off. He reaches under the seat. He pulls out like a loaf of really good-looking rye bread, sits it on his little folding thing, and then he pulls out some really good-looking pastrami, and he makes his son a sandwich. He makes himself a sandwich. He puts all the extra stuff back under the seat, and they're enjoying these sandwiches. And I turned to the guy and said, "Wow, the sandwiches looks really good. Where's it from?" And he said, "Well, I was thinking of it in a kind of a foodie way. I wanted to know where the good pastrami was." And that wasn't his interest at all. He said, "Well, it's not really about." It's like it's kosher. He's like, that's what's important. This is kosher food. We follow these laws, these traditions. I said, okay. And then, so I didn't get a sandwich. And then, he's reading from a book on Jewish wisdom, and I asked him. So I'm just trying to make conversation with the guy. We're going to be sitting elbow to elbow for the next 6 hours. I thought I'd have a conversation, and I said, "Oh, what are you reading?" He said, "Well, this is a book of Jewish wisdom, and da da da." And I said, "Man, I'd love to read it sometime. I grew up. I'm of the Jewish lineage, but I really, I don't know that much." And he said, "Well, you can't really just read this book on your own. It doesn't work that way. You need a rabbi. You need somebody to explain this book to you." And in the moment, I think my ego got the better of me. I didn't say this out loud, but in my head, I'm like, I'm a grown-ass human being. I can read a book. Do I really need a rabbi to, understand this wisdom? If so, maybe, they should write it in more plain, so everybody, why can't wisdom be presented in a way that's understandable? And of course, lo and behold, now I have a student who comes to me and he said, "Man, I bought Modern Chord Progressions." This is a book by Ted Green. He's like, "I can't make heads or tail of it. Can you walk me through it? I know you know Ted's thing." And I said, "Yeah, of course. Don't be intimidated. It's just chords. It's But I realized, I was an idiot. Whatever, I never got this book of Jewish wisdom, but sometimes you do need help understanding stuff, because the people that know all the stuff aren't always the people that can put it in ways that everybody gets, or cut it up into chunks that people can really appreciate. Even Ted, who, and I'd love to find out more about your experience with Ted. When I studied with him, he made it so accessible. For people that don't know, Ted Green was this amazing guitar player and teacher in LA, and taught everybody in the 70s and 80s and 90s, and
literally, I think everybody.
Literally everybody. And kind of kept to him. I didn't know anything about his personal life. I would just go and take lessons in his little apartment in Encino. And but from his books, like Chord Chemistry and Modern Chord Progressions, I was really intimidated, because I thought it would be like, okay, learn these 20 pages with these thousands of chords and be able to play it in all 12 keys. And, I'm sure Ted had students like that who did that kind of heavy lifting. But he, I think, sensed in me early, a thing about Ted was that he didn't teach everybody the same way. He really met everybody head on, and wherever you were at, he could sense that and communicate with you in a way that would get you from where you were to the next step, week after week, year after year. It wasn't just here's the binder of stuff. We'll start on page 1, and then we'll go to. It's he really could get to where you were. So, and I know that because sometimes I'd sneak into my lessons early. I'd get there early, and I'd hear the end of the other guy's lesson, and it was like a different Ted. He was like a different guy. So anyway, but when I studied with him, half the time we just listened to records. We would listen to soul music together.
Yeah.
Aretha Franklin records, or I remember listening to the honky tonk solo from the Bill Doggett combo with him, and he got that that's what turned me on, even though most people probably went to him to learn about 5-part harmony and all kinds of heavy harmony stuff. I like that. I love it, actually. My first lesson with him, I wanted to figure out what Don Grolnick was doing. He was this jazz pianist. Anyway, sorry, I hope I haven't gone way too far afield here, but so my goal with guitar tips, coming way back to where you started, was the guitar is complicated. At the same time, it's super simple. So let's not make it overly complicated, but also let's not make it overly simple. Let's talk about the stuff that real players really need to know to get to the next step. If you give them too much information, they're going to maybe give up. If you don't give them enough information, they're maybe going to give up. But what can we get to that's helpful? That's really genuinely helpful. That's what I tried to do.
Well, I should point out that there's a lot of information out there, and I think it's free. But I also know you have sort of the Guitar Tips Pro. It's like
Right.
Guitar Tips 2.0 or something.
yeah.
And I know, I think there might be some cost associated with that, but is that sort of, if I'm following your logic here, there's some stuff that you just need to know to get you to the next level, and there's some stuff that you don't overcomplicate because you just need to get it in the hands of people so they can figure it out.
Right.
But then there's that next level where you might need a chaperone to the
Right.
dance.
Right.
You might need someone to help you dig through the next deeper, more confusing concept. Is that what Guitar Tips Pro is about?
Yeah, and it's okay. That's a good question. So Guitar Tips, I started a few years ago, and I did about 120 videos. It's on YouTube. They're all free. And after 120, I thought that's a good number. I'll just stop. And then I didn't do it for about 6 months, 8 months, and people kept asking me about it. Like, what happened to Guitar Tips? I loved it. It was really valuable, and I had a lot of subscribers on YouTube, and I took a break because I needed a break. I had a lot going on. But when I looked over my shoulder with a little more perspective, I realized, like, wow, thousands of people have subscribed to this thing that I really started just kind of with no intention of it being popular. I just wanted to share stuff. And in a way, I realized it was like one of the most popular things I'd done. Not popular in like a trendy way, but just like people seem to value it because they're asking about it. People walk up to me on the street and go, Guitar Tips, and sing the song. So I hadn't figured that that's what it was going to be. It was just a thing that I started, and I thought, well, if that's what people value about what I'm doing, then I should pay attention to that. Like, as an artist, as a creator, you have to trust your gut and do the things that turn you on. But you also, I think, need to pay attention to what's the stuff that really resonates with people. And I was kind of surprised that was the thing, really, more than I think my records even that. So I started doing it again. And then I also realized that there was an opportunity for maybe a smaller group of people. Guitar Tips is really for everybody. It's free. It's on YouTube. I'm not ever going to take it down. It exists. I'm creating new tips every week. But there are people who want to do a deeper dive. And so that's what Guitar Tips Pro is. I talk a little longer. I dive deeper into whatever the subject is. I create PDFs so instead of just watching the video and trying to figure out where my finger is on the fretboard, you actually can download stuff. Most weeks I make separate recordings of the material, so instead of just like watching the video, and I don't record the videos in any special way, it's just on my iPhone, but the music I'll actually record in Logic and get a good recording. So if people want to spend time like, what is he playing like? So you get that stuff. And then just other think pieces. I just wrote a tip about 8 essential do's and don'ts for jazz guitar players. I've been creating kind of like secret playlists of the stuff that I'm really excited about. Here's the stuff I'm into. I don't know. I just basically I looked at the stuff that people seem to like the most and think or respond to the most, and think, okay, how could I serve that community? I think if I went too deep of a dive on Guitar Tips on YouTube, I'd lose people. I still get people who go like, why don't you just talk for 5 minutes instead of 20 minutes? But there are people who be like, more is better. And for the people that feel like more is better, I created Guitar Tips Pro. It's not very expensive, but it just gives you more content and more stuff that you can print and download and have with you in your practice session, so you're not glued to the YouTube channel while you're working on your thing.
Yeah, more tools. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you be my editor, please?
Yeah, sure. Wait, are you offering me the editor job?
Yes, we're hiring.
Is this that moment? Is this where something unexpected's gonna happen?
Yes, say yes, John. This is the moment. Carpe diem.
This here is Adam Levy doing Something to Drink About off of Other Desert Cities.
Sunset, blues rise. I still love her, God knows why. My old man had the girls galore, but I stuck behind the counter at the company store.
So you've done all this eclectic stuff. You've wound up playing with interesting people. You've created lots of music. You've had accidental careers in journalism. Accomplished teacher. I'm wondering, how do you make decisions about what's worth your time? Or does stuff just find you?
No.
Well, it sounds like so far a lot of it's found you, but how do you make decisions about what's worth your time?
Wow. That's a heavy question.
Sorry, man.
It's very, wow, that's tough because there are some, my grandfather was a musician. We didn't talk about that. I'll just say briefly, he was an arranger composer, worked in TV. Excuse me, he wrote the Gilligan's Island theme song. He wrote a Christmas song called It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year. He worked on a lot of TV shows in the 60s and 70s. I asked him a similar question when I was old enough to actually have a serious conversation with him about making a living as a creative person. And his advice, it doesn't totally answer your question, but it's in the back of my mind all the time. And his thing was, figure out what you're worth and then charge that, and don't ever do it for less than that. If you want to do somebody a favor sometime, or like in a scholarship kind of way, like, oh, this person, as a teacher or something like that, you can. Or if you want to barter something, so you can. But his basic rule of thumb is, if you decide your time is worth $100 an hour, just charge that, and that's how you decide whether something is worth your time or not. But he said, as soon as you start moving that around, I mean, his hard line was, do it for your price or do it for free. If something turns you on and you just want to do it for free. But don't devalue what your time is worth. Your time is worth this. You can always do a freebie if it seems like a good idea for you. My Aunt Susan had advice about, this was not really about making a living, but I think it's related, about who you sleep with. When I was young, sometimes she would give me advice on, and her thing was like, only for love or lust. There's no other reason to do it, And I think I feel similarly about music. Like, it has to be for love or lust, or otherwise don't do it. So that voice is in my head. And then now I'm reading this book called You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. So some of her advice is in there. So I guess to answer your question, it's still for me kind of fluid, but I think there is a more black and white way to do it that is what, well, certainly in Jen Sincero's book, seems like, I'm about halfway, and it seems like that's what she's saying, is like, if your time is worth this, that's what it's worth. And that's like what my grandfather said. My friend Mason Stoops, that I play music with, has a similar thing. It's just like, make your time be really valuable and then sell it, which I think is like the best thing. It's like, it's just so simple. It's 2 steps. Make your time valuable and then sell it. So did that answer what you're asking?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, that's your answer to what I don't really know. like I said, I'm curious what's going on in your head.
Sure,
So,
okay.
and that's what came to your mind.
Yeah.
I do think it's funny that if you, what was it, your aunt and your
Yeah.
grandpa, if you combine their advice
Yeah.
about do it for lust or love or lust, or for $100 an hour. If you combine the two,
That might be a different career.
Yeah, you might get arrested for that. So, you've accomplished a ton of stuff. You've figured out what your time is worth somehow. I mean, you've made decisions. I'm wondering, even after all this stuff's accomplished in your life, what feels like a risk to you now? And I'm really thinking more creatively, what feels like a risk, because no one wants to wind up broke and living in a box, but
Right.
what feels like a creative risk?
Well, wow. Well, let's see, two things. One is any record that you make, that I make, feels like a creative risk, because you don't want to repeat I say you, I mean me. Let me own that. So I don't want to repeat myself. I don't want to make a record that I've already made. And I don't know. I'm not sure what the next step is, because when I started writing songs, that was the risk. The risk was I'm opening my mouth, which I'd made like half a dozen records before anybody heard my voice on a record. That felt like a risk. Not only the sound of my voice, but my ideas, my songs. And then I'm not sure what else I could do today that would have that same kind of like risky feeling to it in music. I've done instrumental music, I've done songs with words. I guess a creative risk for me now would be to play with different kinds of people. Like I've always been associated with either jazz people or Americana, singer-songwriter, folk thing, or the intersection of that. Maybe playing with just totally different groups of people, totally just get out of my zone of like, if you looked at what I've done so far and had to guess what the next record I might make is, how do I not make that record, but also do make something that speaks to the people that I have some kind of resonance with? And so that's something I think about. I don't know the answer. I don't have a record up my sleeve at the moment. Also, honestly, Guitar Tips Pro felt like a risk to me, because I had been creating something for free for over 2 years. And when I decided to monetize it, I thought, wow, what are people going to say? Are people going to be like, whoa, dude, you've been helping me do this thing for 2.5 years, and now you're going to start charging me for it? That seems kind of weird. Like, so was risky. I had a note on my desk when Patreon first launched. I heard about it. I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever heard of. Like, I don't know if any of your listeners have like developed a YouTube channel or whatever, but you don't make money in YouTube. Like, it's hard to just like, if you have these little pop-up ads for Geico or whatever, I don't think you're making money at that unless, maybe if you're Lady Gaga or like if you have that kind of viewership.
Right.
But for small scale creators, I found I did try putting ads up, and they were just annoying. I mean, I did it for a little while. I was like, this is stupid. I'm not making any money, and everybody's annoyed, and what am I doing? So I took all the ads off. But I wanted to offer something and sell it. I mean, really, the real answer, what's scary about Guitar Tips Pro is it's more information, it's more me. And so there's always that voice in your head of like, is more me more valuable?
Right.
You're
putting out more and you're wondering, do you want me enough to pay?
Yeah. And maybe people will hate it. Maybe people will say, stop. I did have one guy, I generally don't read these comments. My wife is always telling me, don't read the comments. But one guy wrote like, oh, why don't you just get more sponsors? You know? And in my head, at that moment, I wasn't in the greatest mood. I just thought, oh, dude, why don't you get a sponsor? If you don't have $5 a month, you know, to pay for this, like, why don't you get somebody to give, like, why should the creative person have to find the sponsors? You could find a sponsor,
Right.
you know? And so, I don't know, I don't know what people listening will think, but I felt like it was when I finally pushed that button, like, to publish it. Every time I hit that button, whether it's for Guitar Tips Pro or, you know, when you decide to put a record into the world and you, like, let's say you're selling your record through Bandcamp, you upload it, you get the artwork. There's always that moment when you have to push the button. It's not the creating it that feels risky to me. It's the sharing it, because there's nothing risky about creating anything. There's really not. I mean, unless you're creating something with explosive chemicals,
Right.
or something. There's zero risk in creating anything. There's only risk in sharing it. That's the risky part. So, I mean, I'm focusing right now on Guitar Tips Pro, partly because it's the thing I'm doing right now, and also because you just asked me about it. But it's that share button, which anybody, even if you're not a creative type, I'm sure the first time you sent a tweet, you had a moment of hesitation of like, is this cool? Can I say this in public or on Facebook? Like, now we take it for granted. Everybody just shares everything all the time and nobody thinks twice about it. But I'm sure everybody, that first tweet they sent or that first whatever on whatever platform, you get a weird thrill. I mean, that's the thrill of doing it. Is like, it's kind of scary, but it's also kind of thrilling. And then people need to find new platforms. They get bored of tweeting. Oh, cool, there's Instagram. They get bored of Instagram. Like, oh, there's Snapchat. And I think if you're not an artist, that's maybe the stuff that you live in. But if you are an artist, you're like, oh, live performing. That's fucking scary to get on stage. Oh, I've done it a couple thousand times. It's not really that scary. Oh, I know what I'll do. I'll make a record. Oh my God, what do I do? How do you make a record? I don't know. Oh, it's not really that hard. You just rent a room and you hire an engineer and you write some songs. And then it's like, oh, a couple years ago I made a record by myself. I decided I was going to write all the songs at home. I was going to record it at home. I was going to mix it at home. It was going to be a complete one-man show. The only thing I outsourced was mastering, because mastering is a whole other thing. And I called all my friends, like, how do you record? I had never done it. For all the years I had been playing on records, there was always somebody else on the other side of the glass. And there was no glass. I was just in my pajamas in my bedroom recording stuff and mixing it and sending mixes to friends. Like, is this cool? I can't tell. Like, does the vocal have to be in the middle, or can it move, or all that stuff? And after I did, I was like, oh, it's not that scary, and whatever. So I don't know what my next thing in that realm will be. I'm not going to, ride a dirt bike across the Grand Canyon or anything like that.
Okay. I think you're talented and smart and lucky to whatever extent that luck plays a role in it. And you've been successful in the ways that, a lot of people try to measure it, whatever that is.
Yeah.
If you really sucked at music,
Yeah.
do you think you would keep trying just for the love of it?
Oh, wow.
Or is the rush somewhere at the intersection of ability and desire?
If I really sucked at it, would I keep on trying? Wow. No, I don't think I'm that guy. I've seen people like that, and I marvel at them. I've done like guitar workshops, and I used to fill. A friend of mine in Berkeley, California, has this thing called the Berkeley Jazz Workshop, and sometimes when he couldn't teach the classes, I'd fill in for him. And sometimes I'd see these guys that were like in their 50s or even more, who just did not have whatever that thing is, but they'd do it week after week, and it brought them so much joy. I guess the answer is, if it really brought me joy, I wouldn't care if I was good at it or not. I'm not very good at Scrabble. but I play a lot of Scrabble with my cousin. I mostly get my ass handed to me game after game. And I read books and I try and get better and I learn new words and I learn new strategies. I mostly lose. And I still keep playing because I love it. I love it. So maybe I would. It sure helps to have the universe give you a thumbs up, you know? But I mean, I've sure tried some things and not been good at them and stopped pretty quickly. So, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of things I'm not good at that I just don't do, you know?
This makes me think of TED, so I'm going to sort of... What are some of the things, if anything, that you want to pay forward? I mean, it sounds like you've done an awful lot with, 120 free videos on YouTube and all that stuff. And that's giving information for free, but...
Well, that and...
Or if it's not what, maybe why?
Yeah.
Or who made you want to pay it forward? What?
Jeff Sanford made me want to pay it forward. You've probably not heard of him. He's a multi-instrumentalist in the Bay Area. So I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born here in Encino. I say here, we're not in Los Angeles. We're in Santa Barbara. But
You were born in the basement of this strange building?
I was born in this. I'm actually a military project.
Yeah.
No, so I was born in Los Angeles, and I went to Dick Grove School of Music. That was another happy accident. I was supposed to go to GIT. I enrolled in GIT, and 2 weeks before classes started, somebody mentioned Dick Grove, and I went there, and I was like, oh, this is where I should go. It's much smaller. That changed my life. It changed my whole perspective. Anyway, about paying it forward. When I was 23, I left LA in 1989. I moved to San Francisco because of my girlfriend at the time got accepted to school up north. I didn't know anybody in San Francisco. I had no gigs. I had no prospects. I just wanted to follow my girlfriend, and I was ready to leave my hometown, as many people do at that age. I was 23. I was like, okay, I'll leave my hometown. And I started asking around, like, are there any jam sessions? Or like, I tried to figure out where I could meet people because I didn't know anybody. And somebody said, oh, it's not really a jam session, but you should go meet this guy, Jeff Sanford. He plays at this restaurant lounge. It's still there. It's called Nick's Rockaway Beach in Pacifica, California. It's about 20 miles south of San Francisco. Go talk to him. Maybe you can play with him sometimes. He needs a guitar player. And I got my car and I drove down there to Nick's Rockaway Beach. And I talked to Jeff. And he was really amazing musician. He played everything. He played clarinet, all the saxophones, flute, everything. And he had this little combo on this stage. And they played for dancers. Like, people were doing waltzes and foxtrots. Like, it was a real live band playing, and they knew every song. Like, you couldn't stump them. People would make requests, and they would play every song, and had this great... Anyway, I asked him if I could play with him sometime. He's like, well, we can't pay you anything because, the club pays us this much money. We don't really need a guitar player. We have a full band, but you're welcome anytime to come sit in with us, and, we'll make sure that you get fed and, drinks if you want drinks. And so I would go down there anytime that I could. And I learned so much from him about playing professionally. Like, everything from, like, don't wear white socks with a dark suit, which I didn't know when I was 23 because nobody had told me that yet. Show up early. When you play a solo, play the song. Like, because people are dancing. It's not a bebop concert, it's it's music as a function. It's functional music. People are here. So in, a few months of sitting in and making no money but eating lots of baked potatoes and whatever I had for dinner there, I learned all the stuff that I should have learned in music school but that they really didn't teach me. I knew the modes. The modes weren't helpful anymore. I needed to know how to actually play. And so I learned so much from that experience. And I say Jeff, he was the band leader. There were other people on that gig. And that gig led to other gigs. And, I was always the young guy. When I moved up there, I was 23. Everybody else on stage was probably 50, which is like what I am now. They seemed so wise and well seasoned. And so why I would want to pay, we live in a time now where all the informational stuff is even more readily available. Like, if you wanted to learn all the stuff I learned in music school, you could learn it for free on YouTube, or you could learn it on my music masterclass, or you could learn it in any number of places, all the informational stuff. But the stuff that you might, I see young guitar players today who could just play circles around anybody you've ever heard. That's not mysterious anymore. People have figured out how to play guitar really, 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 really well.
They've cracked the code, yeah.
They've cracked the code. The 4-minute mile is ancient history on the guitar. Oh, you all right?
Yeah, I think so. Sorry.
Okay. So nobody needs videos about that. But in YouTube, in Guitar Tips, or just in my mentor, like I teach at this school, the LA College of Music, so most of my students are kind of that age. They're college age. They're 19, 20, 21. If I can pay anything forward, it will be not trying to fill their heads with the modes and stuff, but try to teach them stuff about what music, what it really is, like what working is, how to have real lasting relationships. There's people I've been playing music with for 20 years. I hope I'll be playing with them another 20 years. Until there's no more music to play. Like, that's the stuff that's valuable to me.
It's interesting you say they don't teach it in music school. I've often thought, there's a million jazz studies programs, and these kids are coming out. They're hot as pistols. They're out of their minds. But it's not like the old days when people would take you under their wing and you'd learn on the bandstand, and you'd actually gain this knowledge while having lived experience.
Yeah.
And there was some code of bandstand ethics, or I don't know what it was, but
Yeah.
I don't think that exists really anymore unless people like you are out there sharing it, because it doesn't fit into a compressed course schedule about all these things you need to learn to meet the curriculum requirements for whatever they teach you in those schools. But
Yeah.
I didn't go to one of them, so. But it's interesting to me that's the thing, that it's the social part of it. It's not the academic part of it, or even the notes. It's the like. I guess in my mind, I'm seeing the image of like when the guy puts his arm around you and like looks at the music stand, or tells you don't piss off the sound man, or something like that. These are the things that. This is the generational thing that really. Now that there's YouTube,
Right.
To learn all of the guitar lessons, I guess that's the kind of thing, that the human part that doesn't exist anywhere else, except for maybe your kind segments on Guitar Tips.
Yeah, I look back. I studied guitar with Jimmy Weibel when I was a kid.
Oh yeah,
yeah. When I was
didn't you have all those Jimmy Weibel etudes and stuff like that? Yeah.
And when I was studying with him in 1978, 79, something like that, he was playing guitar in Evita when it was doing its first run in LA. And I wish, looking back, that I had had the nerve to ask him if I could come watch him do the show sometime. Like, to sit in the pit super quietly and just like, and I think he would have said yes. Like, he was a great mentor. He's one of these guys that throughout his career, like, people have stories. Like Cheryl Bailey, I don't know if you know Cheryl, she's a guitar player. Like Jimmy, I'm going to get this wrong, but he either gave her a guitar that he had made, or he like kind of had a luthier like make a guitar for, like he basically surprised her with a guitar. I haven't given anyone a guitar yet. That I'd love to do that. But just like, I don't know. I don't know how I got off on that, but just thinking about like, Ted couldn't really do that because he wasn't out doing a million gigs. So he couldn't take you to a gig and have you sit next to him and be like, well, this is how you do it. But Jimmy, I did get to see him work in studios sometimes with my grandfather. And that's the thing, you know, as far as like mentoring or apprenticing, I don't want to accept that apprenticing is a lost art. I think it's not. I'm just not exactly sure how to do it. Maybe it's, you know, having some of my students come and like set stuff up and like sit with me and, you know, watch. I don't know. I'm just not sure exactly how to do it, but people sort of take it as a given that there's no apprenticing anymore. And I don't want to believe that.
Yeah, I think there is apprenticing. I just think it all happens under the radar. I studied with Ted for a little while, and you know, musically, it sort of blew my mind. I don't think I actually made the most out of the experience because I wasn't really ready musically. But he did a few things. Like I walked in, I said, Ted, I'm trying to play an audition. And I was actually thinking of going back to school for music. I got played under the table by a bunch of 16-year-old kids who were in 11th grade, and I realized, okay, I'm probably not going to go back to music school. But I said, Ted, I'm going to play an audition, and I really like these archtop guitars, and I don't really know what to do. And he just said, well, here, take this one and play this on your audition. Just take it. And you know, it was a vintage instrument. I mean, it probably wasn't the nicest one, but he just said, wow, here. And I said, well, I was sort of speechless, like, wait a minute, you're gonna trust me?
Yeah.
And this was like some human thing that was going on. It wasn't about the notes. I mean, he showed me like the best way to play. I'm old-fashioned, and it was, you know, I did the best that I could. But the thing that stuck out to me, now that I can't remember all the chords in that tune, is that he actually showed a little bit of trust and said, I know you'll come back.
Yeah.
Like, we do this for each other. We look out for each other.
Wow.
Guitar lessons were $22, he said. And if you don't have 20, like the guy should have been charging $500 an hour, but they were $22. And he said, if you don't have the money, we'll just come anyway because the music's more important than the $22. But these were this was not actually about the music that I was learning. I was learning about here's how you conduct yourself and do it for what it costs, or do it for free. Like like you said.
Right.
Like that's the important part.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
But that was sort of, I mean, I did go see him play one or two shows that he would play in the balance of his lifetime after I met him, and that wasn't very long. But that's, you know, I didn't get a chance to learn from him on the bandstand, but I get a chance to learn about that. And I thought that was an interesting thing to take away from a guitar lesson.
Wow. Yeah.
And like that's the subtle stuff that makes the world go around.
Walking past my lover's house, bitter taste, it fills my mouth. Too much whiskey, too much smoke. Last night's tears hang on my coat. Now the rain has stopped its fall. Street shines like a mirror ball. The sun comes on, it's just enough. Watch the flowers waking up. It's washing day. It's washing day. Colors run and fade away.
This here is the title cut off Adam's album, Washing Day. I just love this tune.
A mother with her child in tow. Change old paper for silver coins. I lose myself in all this noise. Waking from a peaceful rest, counting down a minute left.
I want to ask you a little bit about support networks and relationships. When you're struggling with something, whether it's artistic or financial or otherwise, I don't know what it is, but if you're struggling with something, are you the kind who deals with it alone, or do you reach out to someone? And if you do reach out to someone, who do you reach out to? You don't have to give me details about them, but what are the kind of people that help you keep it in check if you don't do it all by yourself?
There's really two people that I trust, that I check in with about stuff all the time. One is my wife, who's super creative, works in a creative realm, not in music. She's a designer. She does interior design for an architectural firm. So if you've been inside a building and anything that you see visually that's not the building itself, but she's responsible for stuff like that in office buildings and all kinds of workspaces and healthcare spaces. And she's the most honest person I know. She doesn't sugarcoat anything. She's not mean. She never, she's not. She will tell you the truth no matter what. And everybody needs somebody like that in their life. So sometimes I ask her stuff, even like what you were asking about, well, how do I know when something's worth my time? Sometimes I'll ask her, I'll say, this is this project, this is what the money is, this is what the time is. Should I do this? And she is the just absolute zero bullshit factor. So when I can't figure stuff out, when I'm a little bit confused about anything like that, and also even just aesthetic stuff, if I'm working on a poster for a show, is this poster cool? Well, I mean, her whole world is visual. It's about color and, all the stuff that we think about with sound and harmony and stuff, like that's her world, but through her eyes instead of her ears. So I check in with her about lots of stuff. And so that's my number one. And my number two is my friend Rich, who I play in a band with. We check in with each other, like almost. There's always once a month where one of us will sound the other out about, a professional thing or a creative choice or just anything about this life in music. And Rich is also a very no bullshit person. But has the perspective of he's out there doing it too, He's been on tour with Katie Lang all summer long playing pedal steel. And, that's about as great a gig as you could have. But, now he's off tour for a few months, and I'm sure he'll get calls to, play at the Hotel Cafe for some unknown singer-songwriter for $100 on a Tuesday. And, do you take that gig? Does that make sense? Should I do that? I remember Rich about 15 years ago, when he was already playing great guitar, decided he wanted to play pedal steel. And I remember he wrote to his mentor, or mentor, not really, hero maybe was a better word, because he didn't know him, a guy named David Lindley. And he wrote to him and he said, I'm thinking about doing this thing, but I'm worried I won't have enough time to practice the guitar, and then I'll just suck at two instruments. I'll be a shitty guitar player and a shitty pedal steel player. Is it worth it? And David Lindley wrote him, he just wrote to him from his website, some general email, and David Lindley wrote back and he's like, yes, you should totally, if you're excited about it, you should totally do it. The guitar's not going anywhere. If you've already invested in it, you love it, it's not going anywhere. Take this journey and see where it goes. And now, 15 years later, Rich is the pedal steel guy of his generation. If you need pedal steel, whether you need it to sound like, Nashville 1958, or if you need it to sound like the future. I mean, he's just been touring with Katie Lang, and now he's telling me he's been talking to St. Vincent and he might do something with her. Like, that's like very different musical worlds. And like he's that guy. But if he hadn't got that advice from David Lindley or from somebody, or just hadn't had that aha thing, he would just be another really great guitar player in LA. And now he's just so much, he is that guy, but he's also so much more than that. So I check in with Rich because he's super honest and super real, and also the questions that come up for me have come up for him too. So between my wife and Rich, that's really my support network.
Thanks for sharing that. I like to just try and underscore the fact that people either do this in isolation, which deserves credit, or they do it with the support of people.
Yeah.
Because they are humans.
Yeah.
And well, when I was stalking you to try and do some research for this, were you recently married?
I was, yeah.
So have you been married? Well, so I guess, have you been married before? Or is is it like just a different time in your life now, or?
No, I was widowed, actually.
I didn't know. Sorry. I didn't.
It's okay. I was widowed in 2009.
One of the things that I personally struggle with all the time is this idea of transition. I'm at an age where things are going to change whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
Some of it's in my control, a lot of it not.
Yeah.
It sounds like maybe you've been through a few transitions. What do you think about transition, or are there any big transitions on your horizon? Like, this stuff keeps me up at night. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
But what do you think about life transition? Like,
well, I'm definitely feeling it. It's funny, talking earlier about Jeff Sanford and being this young kid who didn't know enough to wear dress socks with dress-up clothes. I was always forever the young guy. I went to Dick Grove School of Music right out of high school. I was 17. Almost everyone else in that school had already been to college or played real gigs or lived some life, and there I was the young guy. And throughout a lot of my career, I've felt that way. When I was writing at Guitar Player, I was one of the younger guys there. Lots of musical situations I've been in, and over the last 10 years or so, that started to turn. When I was in Norah Jones's band, I was not the young guy. I was actually an older guy relative to most of the people in that band. And now, I just turned 50 last year. People are dying, but very recently a bass player that I used to play with in New York passed away, who's our age, and that's starting to happen. That had never really happened before in any great numbers. And it's a funny time because at the same time, lots of my friends are having kids. I know a lot of couples who are maybe just a little younger, or maybe the man is my age and the woman is a little bit younger. So there's a lot of new life coming in, and there's also people passing on, and a lot of my heroes, the few that are still around, they're not you. So I don't know. I'm feeling the transition. I can't really articulate what it is. I just know I'm not the young guy anymore. I've had my first colonoscopy, so I know I'm not the young guy anymore. I've been widowed. I've lost friends. I have to stay in touch with the young guy because that's what gets me to pick up the guitar every day and be super stoked to figure something out that I never could figure out before, or to just get lost in it. But I also have to embrace the fact that I am, more in the place of being able to, as you say, pay it forward, and maybe, since I don't have kids, mentor kids, or at least help them, at the music school where I teach. Yeah, I don't know. And then sometimes I'm not even sure where I'm at. So it's hard to know about transition. In the last week, two people said things to me that made me kind of scratch my head. And I was on a gig and I was talking to a really great jazz saxophone player, and we mentioned some other gig that we'd both been at, and I said I really liked it. It was hard to describe, and he said, well, it's kind of like avant-garde Americana. And he said, and that's kind of like what you do. You're kind of like, that's what you do, avant-garde Americana. And I was like, is that what I do? Like, I don't know. And then the next day I was at a gig playing some jazz, or not a gig, just hanging out with some musicians. And one of the guys said to me, so refreshing to like hang out and talk music with you, because you know, I'm usually hanging out with all these jazz guys. And in my head, I'm like, wait, am I not a jazz guy? I thought I was. So I don't know. And also right now, there's a lot of really amazing, super young guitar players in LA. Oh, I say super young, I mean like between 20 and 25. Some of the best guitar players I know in LA right now are like half my age. I meet their parents sometimes and I'm like, wow. I relate more to the guitar players because we're part of a tribe. But, you know, some of the stuff that keeps me up at night is probably more like what keeps their folks up at night than about. So I'm not articulating this very well.
Well, it wasn't a really closed loop kind of question.
Okay.
The only reason I ask is because personally I'm searching around for answers.
And what do you find? Are you reading books? Are you...
No, I'm talking to people like you and asking questions.
Yeah.
That's the cool thing about what I get to do, is I go find interesting people and say, do you have this thing that you're trying to sort out?
Yeah. Well, I
a little selfish, but I'm curious about it.
You asked about like creative risk. I mean, it comes into a different focus now. When you're 30 and you're like, I'm going to make a record, you don't think about, you know, is this my last record or you don't think about legacy. Like I still don't think about legacy, but I think you do start to think about that stuff when you look around. And like when I got to play with Alan Tousaint, right? Nobody in the room knew it was going to be his last record. We were just making a record. Like at the end of the session, he said to everybody, oh man, I'll see you guys at the Vanguard, because the last record he made before that, when it came out, he did a week at the Village Vanguard in New York. So he didn't think it was going to be his last record. And so it just feels more serious now, and I resist that because I worry that taking things too seriously is not helpful to creativity. But at the same time, like there is a weight to it, like there is a weight. So that's what I'm struggling with, right? In whatever, if this is transition, it's like, how can I continue to think about things in an open, playful way, and at the same time take responsibility for what I've done and what I'm doing? I'm not sure. I want to do both of those things, and I'm not sure how to strike that balance, you know?
Well, good. I'm glad I'm not alone.
No.
Let's see. I think we should probably wrap up here. Before we do, maybe you can let listeners know the best places where they can find out more about you and social media and all that. And I will provide links in the show notes. But where is you think the best place to get the more info about you?
These days it's Instagram. I mean, people should go. I have a website. It's adamlevy.com. All my gigs are posted there. There's lots of stuff there that's meat and potatoes. And though I am on Twitter and Facebook and all that, I put stuff on Instagram all the time, and I feel like that's maybe the most lively way to see what I'm up to in pictures and in video. And you can still find out where my gigs are and all the practical stuff there, but that's where I'm having the most fun.
Well, listeners, go to Instagram. There'll be links. You'll be able to find it. I've really enjoyed talking with you, and I appreciate it. I hope we get to keep in touch. And I'm curious to find out what's calling you next. Maybe I can follow up with you in a couple of weeks or months or a year or something. I'm sort of wondering what kind of thing is going to grab you next.
Yeah.
Because you seem to stumble into all kind. It's like the combination of being talented and prepared and everywhere all at the same time, and then just stumbling around in all these great things. I'm wondering what it is next. So please do keep in touch, and I'll provide some updates for listeners out there too.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. All right, there you have it, everybody. This episode is coming to a close. A big, big sincere thank you to Adam for coming on the show, and a big, big sincere thank you to all you listeners out there. Thank you for your time and attention. It was great to have you. If you have any feedback, please do feel free to shoot an email to info@makemoveswithjohn.com or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We'll be there. Just search Make Moves with John. You'll find us. And I do encourage you to please swing by makemoveswithjohn.com, find the blog post for this episode, and you'll be able to follow the links to learn more about Adam and purchase some of the fine, fine music you heard in this episode. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast, and please do spread the word. Okay, folks, another episode is coming soon. Until then, please take good care of yourselves and go out there and make moves. Thank you.